Listen carefully, because what I am about to tell you will shatter everything your civilization believes about dominance, evolution, and the natural order of the galactic hierarchy. 3 cycles ago, the Supremacy Council made a catastrophic mistake. They allowed a human onto the trial of ascension, and that single decision changed the fate of 17 star systems forever. This is the story of how naked apes with their pathetic primitive instincts nearly brought the entire Valorian Empire to its knees. My name is Krelavox, and I serve as a sanctioned observer for the Grand Tribunal of Valorian. Trust me when I say that after 8,000 years of watching civilizations compete in the trial of ascension, I have seen everything. Or so I thought. Then they announced the contestant from Earth. The chamber erupted into absolute pandemonium. Literally. The the magnificent observation deck actually started vibrating from all the outraged shrieking. Representatives from the Jean Collective were practically levitating off their seats. The Kethrani delegation looked like they were about to file a formal complaint with the Cosmic Senate. Even the normally composed sentinels of Altair were clicking their mandibles with what I can only describe as nervous agitation. And there, standing in the contestant preparation chamber, was Marcus Webb. Now let me paint you a picture of what we were looking at. Marcus Webb was approximately 1.8 meters tall. He had this bizarre carbon-based epidermis that was weirdly soft. His hair was a reddish-brown color that seemed entirely impractical for combat purposes. He had 2 arms, 2 legs, and this is the important part, absolutely no defensive biological enhancements whatsoever. No exoskeleton, no venom sacs, no telepathic nullification glands. The humans literally had nothing. The trial regulations were absolutely clear. Participants were permitted to bring tools, 1 set of tools appropriate to their evolutionary stage. The Valorians, they brought energy phase harmonizers and molecular restructuring devices. The Kethrani arrived with sonic disruptors and probability-altering shields. The Jean sent their representative with gravitational manipulation apparatus and temporal displacement arrays. Marcus Webb walked into the arena carrying a rock, a length of rope, and approximately 15 wooden spear-like implements. I am not exaggerating. The entire chamber went completely silent. Even the crowd noise just stopped. It was like the sound had been physically removed from the universe. Then someone, I think it was a junior administrator from the Valorian contingent, actually laughed, like an honest, genuine laugh that started the cascade of ridicule. The trial coordinator, this insufferable Valorian, named Potherake, with his ridiculous electro-plumage and his air of eternal superiority, literally had to pause the proceedings because he was too busy being amazed at the situation. When he finally regained his composure, his voice was dripping with what I can only describe as malicious amusement. "Are we to understand," Potherake announced, his words echoing throughout the arena, "that the human delegation presents primitive objects as their technological foundation? Did their civilization send their simplest citizen to compete against us?" Marcus did not look intimidated. He actually looked calm, like he was standing in his backyard instead of a massive amphitheater capable of holding 10,000 observers. He had this slight smile on his face that was either brilliant strategic confidence or absolute obliviousness. I genuinely could not tell which. "The rules say tools appropriate to our evolutionary stage," Marcus replied, and his voice was steady and completely devoid of sarcasm. Well, mostly devoid. There was a hint of something underneath. My species didn't develop technology in the way you define it for about another 200,000 years after we made these things. So technically these are appropriate. The crowd went absolutely berserk. Arguments erupted across every faction. The Valorian contingent was demanding immediate disqualification. The Kethrani were filing formal protests. The neutral observers were actually debating whether they should step in or let this catastrophe unfold. But the trial rules were the trial rules. And according to ancient cosmic law, once a contestant was registered and appeared in the arena, they could not be removed unless they violated explicit combat regulations. The rules said nothing about tool sophistication, only appropriateness to evolutionary development. The first challenge was a standard combat evaluation. Each contestant would face a series of holographic combat drones that increased in difficulty and aggression with each wave. The Valorian went first, naturally. His name was something unpronounceable, but we all just called him Victory, because he never set up about how inevitable his success was. He activated his harmonizer, created some kind of energy shield configuration, and methodically deactivated each drone as they appeared. It was efficient, boring, honestly. Very impressive in a completely sterile, emotionless way. The Kethrani female Tessera something or other went next. She used her sonic disruptors with practiced precision. Each drone was essentially obliterated before it even fully materialized. She was faster than Victory, more aggressive, still boring. Then Marcus stepped into the arena. The first drone activated. It was a small, agile unit programmed with basic hunting algorithms. Marcus looked at it for exactly 2 seconds. Then he made a sound with his mouth, something between a hiss and a click, and threw one of his wooden implements with absolutely perfect accuracy. The spear didn't destroy the drone. It just hit it. But here's the thing. Marcus had positioned himself such that the drone's attempt to dodge the spear caused it to follow a trajectory directly into the arena's energy barrier. The barrier wasn't supposed to be activated during the trial, but it was flickering slightly, and the drone's collision with it caused a minor cascade failure. The drone exploded. Now technically, Marcus had destroyed a drone that was supposed to be vulnerable to energy weapons. He did it with a piece of wood and understanding of physics. The crowd was starting to murmur. This was interesting in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. The second wave was more complex. 5 drones, different configurations. Marcus moved differently now. I noticed something that most observers probably missed. He wasn't moving to attack the drones. He was moving to understand their patterns. Each time he threw a spear, he wasn't trying to hit them directly. He was trying to see how they'd respond. It was like he was having a conversation with them. A very violent conversation that involved sharp projectiles. But still, when the third drone tried to close in on him, Marcus did something absolutely brilliant. He tied a length of his rope to a spear, created a loop, and this is going to sound absurd. He lassoed the drone's sensor array. Not destroyed, not disabled, just caught it. Then he used his body weight to pull the entangled drone toward the energy barrier again. This time it wasn't an accident. The barrier exploded in a spectacular cascade of malfunctioning light and sound. The entire arena shook. Kethrani looked like he was about to undergo spontaneous molecular disassembly. But here's the thing about trial regulations. If environmental systems malfunction and the arena becomes unsafe, the trial has to be paused, which it was, which meant Marcus technically survived the second wave without actually defeating the drones in the conventional sense. He'd just broken the arena. By accident. Possibly. As the repair crews rushed in, and the observation deck erupted into furious debate, I found myself absolutely fascinated by this human. Not because he was powerful, but because he was playing the trial completely differently than every other contestant in recorded history. He wasn't trying to prove he was the strongest. He was proving something infinitely more dangerous. He was proving he could adapt to anything. The trial coordinator's chamber was in absolute chaos when they reconvened 3 hours later. I was monitoring from the observation gallery, and let me tell you, I have never witnessed such visceral panic among the upper echelons of galactic authority. Kethrani was pacing back and forth like a Valorian in heat, which is to say he was moving in frantic, unpredictable patterns, while his electro-plumage flickered between angry red and absolute crimson. The Kethrani representative, a distinguished individual named Morvik, was engaged in what appeared to be a formal protest that involved so much clicking and whistling that I genuinely thought he might hyperventilate. Even the neutral arbiters seemed unsure whether to continue or declare the entire event void. But Marcus just sat in the contestant lounge, calmly examining his remaining spears and retying the sections of his rope that had become frayed. The absolute confidence radiating from this human was either inspiring or terrifying. Possibly both simultaneously. The Regulations Committee made an announcement that I found absolutely hilarious. They declared that the trial would continue, and this was a critical but, the arena's environmental systems would be maintained by a dedicated fail-safe team, and any deliberate damage to the arena would result in automatic disqualification. They were basically saying that Marcus couldn't accidentally break things anymore, because they were going to prevent him from accidentally breaking things. It was like watching someone create a rule specifically to counter a strategy that might not even have been intentional. Fascinating. The next challenge was psychological evaluation combined with tactical problem solving. Contestants were placed in individual scenarios that required them to make decisions under extreme pressure. The environment would shift based on their choices, and the trial coordinators would measure reaction time, adaptability, and decision-making quality. Victory went first. He was placed in a scenario where he had to navigate through a series of increasingly hostile environments while maintaining a specific objective. He used his harmonizers to create barriers, dissolve obstacles, and essentially brute-forced his way through every single challenge. Time, 47 minutes. Success rating, 93%. Tessara's scenario was different. She was placed in a social negotiation simulation, where she had to convince artificial intelligence representatives from 3 hostile alien civilizations to agree to a trade agreement. She used her sonic manipulation abilities in subtle ways to influence emotional responses. Time, 32 minutes. Success rating, 98%. Then it was Marcus's turn. The scenario parameters were intentionally different. Trial coordinators claimed this was standard procedure, that each contestant received unique challenges based on their capabilities. I suspected they were testing to see if the human would break like everyone else's hopes when faced with impossible odds. They placed Marcus in what they called the survival protocol. The scenario was simple on the surface. Marcus was in a hostile environment with progressively increasing threats. But here's where it got interesting. The environment wasn't just hostile, it was designed to be indestructible to conventional weapons. The walls were made of reinforced nano-lattice. The threats, these artificial creatures programmed with every predatory algorithm known to Valorian science, were equipped with adaptive defense systems that modified their resistance based on repeated attacks. This was not a challenge for weapons specialists. This was a challenge designed specifically to break Marcus. The creature emerged from the shadows first. It was tall, maybe 3 meters, with multiple articulated limbs and adaptive plating that shifted color based on its threat assessment. It looked at Marcus with what I can only describe as predatory hunger. Marcus looked back at it, and then I am being completely truthful here, he smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a forced smile. A genuine, almost joyful smile. Okay, he said out loud, completely alone in the scenario chamber. Let's see what you've got. The creature charged. Now here is the critical difference between Marcus and every other contestant we had observed. Victory and Tessara, and all the thousands of competitors across millennia, approached challenges with the assumption that problems had solutions designed by intelligent beings. They looked for the pattern, the trick, the system's weakness. Marcus approached it like he was dealing with an actual animal. When the creature lunged, Marcus didn't try to fight it head-on. He moved, not dramatically, just efficiently. He positioned himself against the wall and watched the creature's movement patterns. The first spear he threw wasn't an attack. It was a distraction. The creature followed the trajectory of the spear, which meant it wasn't paying attention to Marcus's position shift. The second spear he threw was different. Marcus had been observing, and he'd noticed that the creature's adaptive plating had a slight delay in response time whenever it changed direction rapidly. The spear struck precisely at that moment of vulnerability, embedding itself in what I can only describe as the creature's shoulder joint. The creature shrieked, a sound that echoed through the chamber and made even the observers in the gallery flinch. But it wasn't fatally wounded, it was angry. What happened next was something I had never witnessed in all my years of observation. Marcus tied his rope around a fallen section of environmental scaffold, something that had been knocked loose during the creature's initial charge. He created a loop, and then he did something that seemed completely insane. He climbed, not away from the creature, upward, higher into the chamber. The creature followed, but its mass worked against it. Its climbing attempts were clumsy and inefficient. Marcus, despite his comparatively fragile physiology, was able to navigate the vertical landscape with surprising agility. He reached an elevated platform and looked down at the creature below. Then he started throwing spears downward. Not randomly, with purpose. Each spear was positioned to make the creature move in specific directions, to force it into positions where its own mass became a liability. He wasn't trying to kill it through direct combat. He was using the environment itself as a weapon. He was making the creature's own body work against it. Within 16 minutes, the creature was exhausted and bleeding from multiple non-fatal wounds. Marcus hadn't won because he was stronger. He'd won because he understood something fundamental about survival that none of our advanced civilizations had bothered to maintain. Adaptation isn't about having better weapons. It's about understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. The trial coordinator's chamber exploded in absolute pandemonium when the results were announced. Marcus's success rating was 99.7%. His time was 16 minutes. He had achieved the highest score of any contestant in the entire round. Pythoric's electro-plumage was flickering so rapidly it looked like it was having a seizure. Morvic was actually speechless, which I learned later was physically painful for Kethrani. The neutral arbiters were engaged in heated discussions that seemed to involve fundamental questions about whether the trial's core assumptions were even valid anymore. But the regulations were clear. The next challenge was the final confrontation, a one-on-one combat scenario between the top 3 contestants. Victory would face Tessara first. The winner would then face Marcus. Victory was supremely confident. He'd never faced anyone stronger than him, because his civilization's entire culture was built around the concept that superior technology meant superior capability. He activated his harmonizer, created his energy barriers, and moved with practiced precision. Tessara was different. She used sonic manipulation to disrupt his concentration, to make him second-guess his positioning. But ultimately, Victory's defensive systems were too advanced. He won, though it was closer than he'd expected. Then Marcus stepped into the arena. Victory looked at this human with absolute disdain. He activated his harmonizer, and the arena flooded with energy pulses designed to disable organic nervous systems. Marcus didn't try to block it. He just moved, flowed around the energy like water, finding its path around rocks. Victory threw everything at him. Energy barriers, molecular destabilization fields, temporal disruption pulses, and Marcus just kept moving, kept adapting, kept responding not with counters but with adjustments. Then Victory made a mistake. He assumed that because Marcus was avoiding his attacks, the human was afraid. So he created a massive energy wave, a wall of concentrated power designed to cover the entire arena and make evasion impossible. Marcus threw his stone. Not a spear, the actual rock he'd brought to the trial. The stone was perfectly ordinary, but the rock's mass, combined with its trajectory, passed through Victory's energy wave at an angle that created a temporary resonance cascade. The wave collapsed in on itself. For exactly 1 second, Victory was without his defenses. Marcus covered the distance between them in 3 powerful strides and struck Victory across the face with his palm, not with weapons, just his hand, sending the Valorians sprawling across the arena floor. Victory tried to rise, but Marcus was already moving. He tied his rope around Victory's wrist and used a lever action against the Valorian's own arm structure to immobilize him. Victory could have activated more weapons, could have tried to destabilize Marcus's nervous system, but he was pinned. The trial coordinator made the call. The human contestant has secured physical dominance. Victory is incapacitated. The trial has concluded. Pythosoric looked like he was experiencing spontaneous molecular disassembly combined with an existential crisis. Marcus released Victory and stood, breathing heavily but completely composed. He turned toward the observation deck and made eye contact with me directly. Not triumphantly, just knowingly. Like he understood something about our entire civilization that we'd been too advanced to realize. The Grand Tribunal had to make an announcement. According to regulations that had remained unchanged for 8,000 years, the winner of the Trial of Ascension was granted access to the ancient archive, the accumulated knowledge and technology of every civilization that had ever achieved ascension status. The human from Earth had won. Morvick actually approached me afterward, something Kethrani rarely do with Valorian observers. His clicking was quiet, almost contemplative. "Do you understand what just happened?" he asked. I did, but I let him continue. "That human," Morvick said slowly, "he didn't win because he was superior. He won because he refused to play our game. He came to a technological arms race with the weapons his ancestors used thousands of years ago, and he made them sufficient. Not because they were better, because he understood that technology isn't about power, it's about problem solving." He paused, his mandibles clicking in what I recognized as profound concern. "Our civilization has spent 10,000 years accumulating knowledge. We've forgotten how to think without technology to think for us. That human, his entire species, they've been evolving their minds for intelligence, not delegating it to devices. We may have just granted access to the archive to the first species that might actually understand how to properly use it." As Marcus was escorted to the ancient archive chamber, I found myself contemplating something that none of my colleagues seemed willing to acknowledge. We had prepared ourselves for thousands of years to face an advanced civilization. We had never prepared ourselves for a species that was simply smarter, and that distinction, I realized, was everything.